my father experienced a second heart attack within the span of about a year, maybe a year and a half. And so that second heart attack was a myocardial infarction, which is what mainstream medicine commonly calls a widowmaker these days. And so that put him into a coma, and it turned my interest in health. As an athlete, you have some degree of interest in health because performance is controlled by that. It turned into a full-blown obsession.
Friends, welcome to the Decentralized Health Podcast and to episode number 18. Today's guest is Zaid K. Dahhaj. Zaid is a circadian biology educator focused on first principles of circadian biology. Inspired to educate the masses ever since his father passed prematurely at the age of 51. Zaid is the light bringer when it comes to circadian biology, and he is here to share his story. We know what he does. Now it's time to find out who he is. Friends, welcome to the Decentralized Health Podcast and to Zaid K. Dahhaj. Friends, welcome back to the Decentralized Health Podcast and to episode number 18. Today we have the light bringer, the circadian biology specialist, Zaid K. Dahhaj. Zaid, thank you for coming on, brother, and spending your time with me. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, brother. Incredibly grateful to be here and share this circadian message to as many people as, listen to this.
Amazing, brother. Thank you very much. So, friends, as you know, we start where every journey starts, which is at the beginning. So, Zaid, please pick any moment in your life where this hero's health journey of yours started and what your life was like before you discovered the quantum and the circadian stuff, and then how it's been since then, and what the kind of the key moments have been for you on this journey.
Yeah, so I often describe this, the process that I went through and the major experience with my father passing around 2015, 2016, and how that got me to the circadian space. But growing up, I was always an athlete. I played competitive soccer since the age of 4. And so, achieving that professional contract was the main goal for me. It was a childhood dream, really. And so I dedicated the next about 20, 22 years to try and achieve that. Got pretty far in that, semi-pro and whatnot, but didn't end up working out in the way that I wanted it to. I think that, everything happens for a reason. And so that led me down this very specific path involving health. But as I was still on that journey, I was actually in England, Blackpool specifically, which is a very random place, but that's where life led me. My father experienced a second heart attack within the span of about a year, maybe a year and a half. And so that second heart attack was a myocardial infarction, which is what mainstream medicine commonly calls a widowmaker these days. And so that put him into a coma. It was a very tumultuous time in my life. It was more so a time of like finding who I was, trying to relate to death, understanding what my purpose in life was. As it naturally, those questions would naturally pop up when you have an event like that. And so a few months later after that, he was in hospice and eventually led to his passing. And so that was something that kind of turned my world upside down, and it turned my interest in health. As an athlete, you have some degree of interest in health because performance is controlled by that. It turned into a full-blown obsession. And then, going down the rabbit holes of nutrition and detoxification and sleep architecture, all this stuff eventually led me down the road of finding circadian biology through the work of Dr. Jack Kruse, which a lot of people find this work through. And it was a feeling. I just had an intuitive feeling that this was the right thing to pursue. And from that point, it's taken on a life of its own. I think this is what, within Joseph Campbell's philosophy is basically the call to adventure. And so that was a pivotal moment for me because I basically oriented my entire life around trying to understand circadian biology and its mechanisms, principles, so forth. And from that, I've been very grateful to come across a lot of people, work with a lot of different clients, whether it be CEOs or, just people who work a regular 9 to 5. And as I pursue this path of mastery, I think that I'm beginning to understand a lot of the more deeper aspects of this work, trying to understand things like hyperpigmentation or vitiligo, things that are more on the edge of mainstream medicine, especially with their standard explanations. And from that point forward, I mean, it's been an incredible journey, and I'm looking forward to seeing where that ends up ultimately 20, 30, 40 years down the road. But super grateful for it all. And it's I'm definitely in my element. That's what I feel like.
Amazing, brother. Amazing. And we have a somewhat similar situation. My dad had 2 heart attacks in 2012,
Mm,
and the last one was one that was supposed to have killed him off, but it didn't. He ended up having like 5 stents put in, and then 2 years ago he was having some other issues again, and I saw on his ear, and this comes from my functional medicine training, I saw creases on his earlobe, and I said to him, like, look, you need to go and get yourself checked out. I was like, that's not a good sign. And when he went to see the guy was like, yeah, like your artery's collapsing. We're going to need to put another stent in, and we're going to need to do a bypass. So he went in to have that done. And as they were trying to do the bypass from the side, they realized that they couldn't do it.
mm,
And they had to do full open chest surgery on him, like take his heart out and do the whole thing. He ended up getting like clots in his groin where they tried to run the feeder through, almost died there. He almost died on the table. And as you say, like, when you have those moments, particularly as a male with your father, it kind of puts you in that role of like, right, I'm the man now then, because they're now in this weakened position. I've got to step into this role. And so that's a very, very powerful experience from a, as you say, like that hero's journey kind of thing, like that welcome to adventure thing. Like, that's when that truly then changes, and it's never going to snap back into a different frame. It's always going to be like that. And you then take on, to say, that adult role. So how did that for you, and I'm going to take this slightly off topic, slightly from a knowing yourself, because you have a very spiritual approach to some things that I've read of yours. How did that change that outlook for you, that more kind of like knowing self, when it came to that kind of hero's journey of your own?
mm. Yeah, I mean, some parts of that I think are difficult to explain, but it's during that whole time when my father was experiencing, with he was in hospice and whatnot, and I was halfway across the world, basically had nobody to lean on. I think going within myself was a big part of that whole subject, or that whole experience. And so for me, I think that's what I rely on most, is just going inwards, as opposed to, getting developing an addiction like, some people do,
Yeah.
to food, or gambling or whatever. And I think that's changed a lot in terms of how I think about the world, but it's also a long-term process as well. Like, it's
Mm.
I didn't have these ideas immediately after that experience. Through the cultivation of writing as a skill, through speaking on podcasts like this, I've learned to kind of blend all of this together. And so that's where I think I have the ability to go deeper on the spiritual aspect of this work.
Yeah.
And it's also very cool because I think, the deeper you go, the more there is to discover, as we were discussing before the podcast even started. So that's how I kind of think about it. I'm very eclectic. I like to take ideas from different areas of life and kind of blend them together. And ultimately, I am a big fan of mastery. I
Yeah.
think there's this classic distinction between being a dilettante and being a master. And for me, considering my experience with soccer from an early age, it was all about understanding how to go at the deepest level with one given subject, as opposed to kind of searching for these things broadly. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I explained that well, but
No,
it's
you did.
some of those things could be explained in a very articulate manner, but some of those things are kind of, I guess, unexplainable as well.
Yeah. And I like that though, because it's the unexplainable that makes life exciting. If we could explain everything, then you'd lose the magic in everything. And I don't know if you've noticed this. Had Carrie Bennett on the podcast, we stumbled on this thing where we said, like, have we noticed that since we've become more grounded in nature, more in touch with the light, that the ability to become spiritually connected is stronger and quicker than what it was before we were grounded, and before we were more quantumly and circadianly balanced? Like, I've noticed that, like, since always seeing the sunrise, always seeing the sunset, spending more time outside, being grounded all the time, anytime I go into like that either that thinktation, as Tom Bilyeu calls it, or that meditative state, I connect quicker, I get downloads quicker. However you want to word these things, whether it's quantumly or from God or from the universe or great spirit, whatever your path decides to call it, I just noticed I have that much more deeper inner reflective kind of point, and I get answers quicker. Have you
Yeah.
noticed that same thing, that as you've been on this quantum circadian journey, that deeper reflection has become stronger since you've discovered all of this quantum and circadian alignment?
Yeah, most certainly. I definitely resonate with that. I think it comes back to that classic universal principle of as above, so below.
Hmm.
And so when we talk about circadian alignment from a physical or biological perspective, I think there's also a spiritual, mental, and emotional alignment that comes with that as well. And so you're kind of hitting, multiple birds with one stone. You're creating
Yeah.
systemic or holistic alignment in your life and in reality. And so that's a very big thing for me. And it's very interesting because I spend a lot of time focused on the circadian work. And so my mind just kind of narrows in on that. And whatever experience I have in life kind of translates into creating ideas around that subject. So,
Yeah.
if I see friends who are up late, midnight, they're playing video games or they're watching TV, like immediately in my mind, I'm thinking about isolated blue light and all this other stuff. But yeah, as above, so below, certainly like that circadian alignment ties into everything else when it
Yeah.
comes to emotional health or spirituality and so forth.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think those hermetic principles become something that you actually feel rather than have to know. Like, I think
Mm.
the more in touch with your surroundings you become, the more in touch with nature you become. The hermetic principles aren't things that you have to, like the Kabbalion isn't something you've got to read and understand. It's something that you intuitively feel. And I think that, again, going back to that culmination of, it's not just the biochemical or the quantum, it's that connective point of mind, matter, spirit, everything. It ends up, as I say, it ends up becoming the knowing, like an akashic download. You end up knowing these things without having to be able to explain them, which is why when you said, I don't think I can put it into words, I know exactly what you mean, because some things are just not, you just can't articulate them. You have to experience them or feel them, and you just can't put that into a word. So thank you for that, brother. That was that was a very, very well put point. So with your background in sports, and particularly in football and soccer, as you say, if you had the knowledge you have now back then, would you have approached all of that differently when it comes to the way that you trained, the way that you ate, the way that you recovered, or would it have been the same? Do you think the outcome would have been different?
Yeah, it would be a complete 180-degree turn, I think, maybe leaving some things pretty much the same. I mean, it was not uncommon for me to train in the middle of the day where, you have UVA, UVB, red,
Oof.
infrared, the full spectrum at large, getting most of the skin exposed as well. I think that's a pretty powerful combination with exercise. But I think I would orient myself around sunrise more. Like watching sunrise was something that was completely foreign to me prior to this work.
Mm,
And I think there's a huge spiritual component to that as well. And it's
yeah,
helped me in so many different ways. But alongside that, I think meal timing would be very important, especially from a performance perspective, kind of thinking about macronutrient breakdowns and how that can relate to what season I'm in my life, whether it's summer or winter, and how that relates to performance on and off the field.
yeah,
I think the biggest thing is probably avoiding the training at night with artificial light. And that's a very tricky situation because the teams that I played with, like that's a very common thing.
yeah.
Even in professional sports these days, you look at teams like, I mean, I'm a big Arsenal fan for life, so how
Hey,
they-
so am I.
there we go.
Good
There we
man.
go. That's amazing. If you look at, how they play, I mean, they're constantly jet lagged for the most part. They're playing at night under
Yeah,
these isolated blue lighting sources. I mean, many of them use the Bluetooth headphones,
yeah.
non-native EMF directly into the brain, destroying melanin and causing melanin degradation. You think about their overall lifestyles and whether they're actually thinking about any of these circadian principles. I don't think most of them are. You
No.
have people like Erling Haaland who like,
Yeah,
they use the blue blockers and they're focused on raw dairy and stuff, but I don't think that's penetrated the field at large. And I think that's a big problem when you consider athletic performance and how you're essentially pushing the human body to its limit. That just means you're going to have to focus more on optimization through circadian alignment.
yeah.
And so that's, I think, a big opportunity for people like us to talk about. That's
Mm,
going into those fields and working with different people. I think is something that's going to be kind of a hallmark of the future. But yeah, for me, I would definitely change around the nighttime trainings because ultimately that would also impact my ability to sleep. I wouldn't get home until maybe 11 p.m. And by then you're missing the largest spike of growth hormone.
yeah.
You're kind of messing up sleep architecture from a high level standpoint. And yeah, those are, I think, those are probably the biggest ones that I would make. Other than
Mm,
that, I would probably keep it the same.
yeah. So that is actually quite a nice segue into something I was going to ask you a little bit later, but now we're on this topic, I'll discuss it now with you. I read one of your posts the other day about um, the gym goers, about how they focus on the macros and the shredded chicken and broccoli, and how they're missing circadian points. You didn't go into too much detail on the post, but you get a professional bodybuilder coming to you and they want to optimize themselves to the highest level. They're already on the PEDs that they need to be on. You haven't got to worry about that or anything like that. How would you change their training to be more circadianly aligned? Or what would you do if they were inside like a blue lit gym and they had to train in that blue lit gym because they didn't have an open gym? Like, what would you do? Because there are some people that watch this that are fitness athletes, bodybuilders. How would you change that for them?
I think the most important thing I would do is just get them to train outside. If you look at the bodybuilders in like the 70s, 80s, 90s, you think of like Arnold Schwarzenegger and those Frank Zane, those types of guys, they would train outside no problem, or they would at least have a very routine sunbathing practice. So that's something I would certainly implement. I don't know, I'm not in the bodybuilding world, so I don't know how many of these individuals are actually doing that. I would assume that there's not many, yeah.
No.
So that's probably the most important thing that I would do. I think the training outside is a big portion that would cover a lot of the benefit.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I mean, it's just if somebody were to train in a conventional gym with isolated blue light and non-native EMF and all this stuff, definitely getting them to dial in the sunrise, dial in the time outside around infrared, if green spaces, the reflection of infrared in general from plants in the plant kingdom at large. And then I think making it very dark after nighttime is very important. So even I know this is very common practice, but changing the nighttime training sessions to the daytime would in and of itself have a massive effect. So just not training after nightfall at all is a big component to this. And just getting them in circadian alignment in general, because I wrote an article on this actually, like the detriment of training in a conventional gym with conventional lighting is that you are stimulating the process of mitochondrial biogenesis, meaning you're making new mitochondria through exercise. But the problem is if you're making new mitochondria in an environment that creates defective mitochondria over time, then you're only adding to the issue of chronic disease, potential chronic disease burden. And so from a bioenergetic or mitochondrial standpoint, that's just not wise, which is why I would rather have people get in circadian alignment and train outdoors ideally. I think that's, I can't speak highly enough on how important of a change that is for especially those types of people.
I agree with you. And when I was in El Salvador in end of November last year, myself and my travel buddy that I went with, Daniel White, we trained in an El Salvadorian gym when we were there, which was, there was no lights. It was just a building with like one door which locked to stop people going in at night when it was closed, but everything else was open. All the windows were all open. Everything was lit by the light. I did the same training program while I was there that I did before I left. And before I left, I'd always have muscle soreness and I'd feel fatigued. My strength was going up, but not very quickly. There, no muscle soreness. My strength was going through the roof. I could literally train day upon day upon day upon day. I felt recharged. I felt ready. And obviously that's the environment as well. Like El Salvador being being volcanic, it's very magnetized, close to the equator. I was out in the sun. I was barefoot all the time. So I was getting all those things. But just training in that environment, it just felt that I could have trained for hours. And then when I went to Austin following that, I trained in Lift Direct, which is very similar. All open doors, all open windows, light coming in all the time. And all the guys in there were jacked and they looked healthy rather than, and I don't mean any disrespect to bodybuilders in the UK, rather than looking like they're struggling to move or, they're sore and they're tight and they haven't got a good range. These guys were fluid. Like really fluid in the way they moved. So obviously their fascia was hydrated and all the light coming in was helping. So I think it's a very, very good point that commercial gyms, you have to offset all of that stuff. Like if I train in a commercial gym, I'm covered, like long sleeves, tracksuit bottoms. I'll have glasses on unless it's the middle of the day, because I don't mind in the middle of the day for the blue light. But if it's early morning or later in the afternoon, I'll wear my blue blockers just to cover as much of the non-visuals and everything that I can so that I'm not creating any mitochondrial damage while I'm there. And I feel it makes a difference. I mean, it might be a placebo, maybe, but I definitely feel a difference for me when I'm covered completely compared to if I go in there in a short sleeve t-shirt and a pair of shorts. I won't lift as much. I won't feel as energized. So I definitely think there's a big thing there where maybe we need to start building some open gyms all around the world, brother, and just have all the bodybuilders go old school Gold's Gym style, Venice Beach Gym.
I've honestly always hated the look and the feel of a conventional gym. I think from the non-native EMF to people sweating everywhere, the lights, I
Yeah.
think that's a big problem that only contributes to, believe it or not, chronic disease burden.
Yeah.
People have this very myopic and reductive idea that nutrition and exercise is the biggest thing to solve our health problems. But I think if you go a level deeper and you understand how the body works through biophysics, there's obviously more important things to consider, or more foundational things, which, the circadian biology, electromagnetism, all that stuff. That's what you build as a foundation. And then
Mhm.
everything gets built upon that. We're not saying that nutrition or exercise is useless, but we have to understand the context of human evolutionary biology along with circadian biology.
Yeah, I agree. And again, that was something that I heard on the Mark Bell podcast that you did, where, like you, I don't think that nutrition and the macros and the training splits and stuff are void. I think they're important, but I think there are hierarchies to this level, to this whole system. And you get the basic fundamentals right, and you'll find that the process of the change that you're after will happen quicker. So that
Mhm.
leads into a very good point. You mentioned the darkness at night for the melatonin, and getting to bed early because after a certain time of night you're not getting the growth hormone pulses and all those types of things. Obviously, that's important for bodybuilders or athletes because we want that growth hormone pulse to help repair, recover, and do all those types of things. Morning time, like sunrise and UVA, are also very important for the hormone signaling, the hormone production, thyroid hormone, all those other types of things, the conversion of aromatic aminos. For people that are new to this world, but are in that space or are looking to optimize their sexual health, their hormonal health, their thyroid, whenever the case may be, why is sunrise and UVA such an important time to be outside?
I think from a high level perspective, you're just creating systemic circadian alignment. So
Mhm.
when we understand that the human body is an electromagnetic and circadian system, that means every aspect of the body is designed to work off of circadian and electromagnetic components, aka the opsins within your skin, non-visual photoreceptors, which are basically light sensing proteins. Those pick up on individual wavelengths of light. Mitochondria, in my opinion, are circadian controlled light sensing organelles. Mitochondria essentially dictate a huge portion of function within any given area of the body. We just have to understand how the human animal is designed. And that might sound trite or like very simplistic to a lot of people who are in this space, but when you step outside of the circadian bubble and you begin to essentially realize that people have no concept of circadian biology. They don't even put a lot of weight to things like evolutionary biology, which, when you start to go down those rabbit holes, I mean, it's pretty clear that this is how the human body evolved and was designed to function. And so the sunrise for me, along with the UVA, I think they serve different purposes, but there are also a lot of commonalities involved. But for an athlete, I mean, you're talking about systemic circadian alignment, which then dictates how well you perform within any given domain, whether
Mm.
it's practice, whether it's especially on the field. I mean, you're talking about at the elite levels, a millimeter of space is the difference between being a winner and a loser.
Yeah.
And so you want to get every advantage that you can get. And in my philosophy is that the circadian stuff is really the 90-10. The
Mm.
most I mean, that covers most of the stuff to get the maximum benefit. But you think about things like muscles or organ systems. I mean, all these things have circadian clocks that are controlled by circadian genes. And so, from a very real perspective as well, not only are we maximizing performance, but there is a very real discussion to be had about avoiding injury,
Yep.
which is, I mean, very commonplace these days. You hear of Achilles tears and hamstring pulls, and I think considering the load that most professional athletes are under, even normal athletes, I mean, they're playing more games than ever, practicing more than ever, and they're pushing their body to a very intense degree, considering modern science and how we figured out a lot of things to increase performance.
Mm.
That has to be considered. We're not only looking to optimize performance, we're looking to also avoid injury. And I think that's something that's not talked about almost at all, even within the circadian space, in my opinion.
No, not at all. I agree with you completely. And I was having this conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and he was like, "Well, when it comes to fitness training and all that kind of stuff, seasonally, from a circadian or quantum biology, like how is it different?" I was like, "Well, summer is all about the anabolism. It's all about pushing and PRing and growing, and there's abundance of food, so you've got all the things you need, all the right signals. You've got the sunshine, which is boosting testosterone and nitric oxide and all these other types of things. This is a prime time to grow or to get faster or what have you. Ideally, it's not probably the time to be looking to cut and get lean, because you're creating a scarcity unnecessarily. And the winter time, all you've got to do is look at other mammals. They hibernate, they rest, they repair, they recover. That's what the winter period is for. And you wouldn't want to then be going into a gym looking to push for a PR or looking to lift more weights. You'd be looking for more maintenance, because you're going to have particularly less food available, all those other types of things. So my question to you, because I answered this for him, but I'm interested to see where you take this. Obviously, this depends on where latitudinally you are in the world, but for myself and for him, and I guess for you, Northern Hemisphere, how would your training or your clients' training or fitness or whatever it is that you're doing for them in that way change through that seasonal change from like a summer to winter time?
Very good question. I think to make it to give a simple answer, but I think a very accurate one just for most people in general, going harder in the summer and taking it easier in the winter.
Yeah.
I think that's a big takeaway for me, because even if you think about it from a spiritual perspective, the anabolic phase is all about, or a physical in this case, the anabolic phase is all about consuming as much food as you can and in maximum performance so you can get the most out of the system, especially from a hormetic perspective. But during the winter time, and we can feel this intuitively as well, I think it's more about rest and digest. I think it's more about taking a more relaxing perspective or route. And this also makes sense considering that, during the summer month, you're really maximizing vitamin D3, but during the winter time, that's where endogenous melatonin comes in. And so endogenous melatonin, considering UV in a lot of places is not as readily available during the winter, you're looking to just get near infrared light outside, meaning in my mind, I think of walks, just going for a walk outside, and then really maximizing darkness to get the most out of the pineal form of melatonin, the circulatory form. So I hope I'm doing a good job of explaining it, but I think for summertime, it's really just about maximum performance. I think about sprints. I think about kettlebell routines. I think about, just going as hard as you can while also maximizing recovery, and then slowly dialing it down until you get to the winter portion where you really focus on walking. Maybe you do a little bit of zone 2, you get some outdoor cold exposure along with some cold training. I personally love to train in the cold. I think it's a very invigorating experience, and it adds more as opposed to takes away when for example, during the summer, if you go for a hot run, that takes away pretty quickly.
It's brutal as well.
Yeah. There's a time and a place for it, but I think there's a nice duality here. And then definitely maximizing the darkness during the winter and earlier bedtimes. I think there's a bigger recovery emphasis when you get into the winter time.
I agree. Amazing answer. Thank you. This is exactly what I said to him. So I'm glad that we're on that same page there, because I didn't want to misinform him. So changing topic ever so slightly, we touched upon this before we started recording, and I don't want to forget this topic, because as I said, I've got a load of questions I was going to ask you anyway, but I don't want to forget this topic. Your son turned 2 yesterday. That's a very young child to have in your life. You are a circadian master. As I said in my intro, which you haven't heard yet, I called you the light bringer because you are the circadian master and all of these things. How did having a newborn impact this circadian alignment for you and your partner? How did you make any changes? Did you have to, obviously you had to make some changes because you couldn't do anything about it, but how did you offset them? Like, how, if people that are listening that are new parents that want to get involved in all this, what would you advise them?
I think I had a good portion of the lifestyle principles in place just by the nature of the work. And, obviously you want to get healthier yourself, but I think there's also a bigger responsibility, especially for men in a family dynamic, to improve the health of, your wife or your brother, your sister within the household as well. And I think you can make some very simple changes like, transitioning from LEDs to incandescents. Incandescents are not perfect, as people in the circadian space mention, but they're a huge step towards health. And they're certainly an improvement when we're talking about lighting systems and lighting fixtures. So that was a big emphasis for me. I mean, as soon as he was born, I placed a huge emphasis on not necessarily watching sunrise because babies, they require a lot more sleep. So I didn't necessarily want to wake him up during that time. I wanted him to get extra sleep. That's again where you have to kind of walk the fine line between, oh, I have to watch every sunrise or else I'm going to die, or, you know, 80 to 70% of the time you watch sunrises, right? So just getting him out for that morning exposure, that AM spectrum, which is, rich in red and infrared, was a very important thing for me because I also wanted to transition him into building more melanin and sunbathing when UVA and UVB were out. And so that morning time was the real priming phase. And I've talked about this at length when it comes to, for example, the 1931 recommendations from the U.S. Department of Labor's Child's Bureau. Believe it or not, the government in the US in 1931 would actually recommend a comprehensive um, set of guidelines to sunbathe baby properly so that they avoid burns,
Wow.
they get the most out of vitamin D3 and all these other things. And that was mainly, I think, a reaction to the rickets and
Mm,
um, what I think rickets, and then I think there's one other condition that I'm forgetting about, epidemic,
mhm.
because obviously you moved from a society that had a huge agricultural emphasis, and then you went into huge cities without much sunlight and whatnot. That created problems in and of itself. But I was pretty astonished by how wise these individuals were in the 1930s because they were talking about difference in UV. They were talking about how you should open the window to allow full spectrum sunlight in. Some very interesting and very high level stuff, in my opinion, that
Wow.
we wouldn't give them credit for because we didn't view them as like scientifically literate at the time.
Mm,
Very wise for their time. I think the level of observation at play was impeccable. And so that's one thing. The morning sunbathing, um, progressively and in microdosing UVA and UVB was very important for my son. Most of the skin exposed. Most of the time he would only wear a diaper. If I could get him nude in the backyard, I would do that. And that was very fruitful because as time went on, I could start to see him adding color. And keep in mind, my son is blue-eyed, blonde-haired, same as my wife, blue-eyed, blonde-haired, which meant that I had to be a lot more intentional about implementing this practice as
mm.
opposed to someone like me who's more, has more melanin, which is responsible for the blacks and browns, which then means there's a lot more photoprotection initially, considering that type of melanin against UV. And then as time went on, I mean, certainly implementing, the red bulbs at night was very helpful, creating a very relaxing environment, not only for baby, but also for my wife. Even to this day, I mean, she still breastfeeds and, he just turned 2. So that's really awesome to see. And by all accounts, I mean, he's a very healthy baby. I mean, we're talking about my pediatrician, by the way, is Dr. Bob Sears, very famous, very
I know that
prominent
name.
within the holistic health space in you
Mm,
know child rearing discussion in this country. But we talked about the vaccinations. We didn't give him any vaccinations. We talked about avoiding vitamin K during birth. That's a story in and of itself that I can get into if you want me to, but very
yeah,
healthy
sure.
baby, top first percentile in height, in weight, very even tan, proper pheomelanin at work. So that's, I think, a testament to the circadian principles and how powerful they are. But just to explain a little bit of the backstory with like how he was actually born, my midwife couple, um, Lisa and Richard Oxenham, also very prominent midwife couple in the States, they basically put us through the whole process. I mean, they're incredible at what they do, true masters in terms of like home birth and in midwifery and whatnot. And that's what we planned on. We planned on a home birth. We went about the whole stages, and then eventually we found out that my wife had an infection, and so sepsis was actually something that she was developing in real time. So we had to do an emergency transport to the hospital. That was a quite an experience in and of itself, considering that they're trying to throw vitamin K and all these vaccinations and whatnot, and they generally don't like emergency home transports because, of course, from the centralized philosophy, they don't really believe in midwifery as much
Mm,
or any of these holistic practices. But either way, we had to do a C-section. It is what it is. It's not perfect. We would rather have a vaginal birth, but we're very grateful to have a very healthy child, and my wife is very healthy as well. And I think again that is a real testament to all the things that we implemented. And I think people need to hear that message because they just feel like they have to go to the hospital for birth.
mm.
But in reality, there's a whole bunch of other options that you can choose from, and you can make the experience a lot more smoother through the implementation of these circadian principles, first and foremost.
Amazing. Wow. And sorry to hear about your wife. That must have been quite scary for you at that moment. Yeah,
Yeah, sure. I
I
mean,
can
certainly
imagine.
was, but I think it was also a very good teaching experience because it also like going forward, I think it informs a lot of my work too, because I am very big on talking about birth and how that ties into the circadian principle stuff. Um, and I think a lot of mothers aren't basically informed. They're not given proper informed consent, especially when it comes to the circadian biology principles.
Wow. Okay. And the vitamin K thing, please go rabbit hole on me. I want to know about this. Why is vitamin K not something to have during pregnancy? I didn't know this.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to basically remind myself of all the study I did on that. But basically, so with newborns, you're basically looking at the fact that because they don't have, I believe, because they don't at that stage of early infancy, they don't have enough of the right form of vitamin K in their system. According to centralized medicine, they're trying to compensate by giving an exogenous form. But the problem is, and that could lead to certain things, like if the baby has some sort of injury, they could potentially bleed out if they're not given intervention in enough time, or they're not given the right nutrients or the right upbringing and so forth. So the whole notion of them introducing exogenous vitamin K, which also comes with a lot of side effects because it's a different
Mm.
form, is kind of flawed from my perspective. And so we looked into vitamin K injection. I was not happy with all the side effects that it potentially presented. Through the work of Dr. Bob Sears and some of the resources that he shared with me, I was not really happy with kind of their justification for using it. I really view it as kind of an iatrogenic intervention.
Hmm.
Iatrogenesis, for people who don't know, is basically harm that is caused by either the recommendation of a medical professional or just pure ignorance. A lot of
Yeah,
medical professionals are just ignorant when it comes to some of this stuff because their education is not very holistic. Um, and so that's where I think we decided to go with was it vitamin K2 shots, or not shots, drops. And then we just started implementing a few of those drops into his diet progressively. And outside of that, no problems really. I mean, he's had cuts and whatnot. There's no excessive bleeding, no negative outcomes that we've experienced. So I don't think that people have to just immediately jump to the centralized recommendation of get a vitamin K shot. And
yeah.
again, forgive me because it's not really my area of expertise. It's something that
No,
I've
no, no. It's actually
looked
fine.
into maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Hmm.
But I think that's a common experience or common theme that you'll find in centralized medicine. They typically don't look at root cause, and so they create these interventions that then have many different side effects
Yeah,
that then could potentially lead to other problems. I mean, you talk about MMR, you talk about the COVID vaccine. All of these things, in my opinion, are stripped away from the context of holism and understanding the body at a first principles perspective.
I agree 100%. Like when the vaccines were rolled out, I was like, no, like I looked at the data that was available and I was like, no, there's not enough data here. Like you can't be rolling this out. And in my head, I was thinking, as Jack Kruse always says, like incentives dictate outcomes. I was like, well, was the vaccine invented for COVID or was COVID invented for the vaccine? And I was like, I don't like where this is going.
Good question.
Um, right. So I was like, right, well, if I don't understand it and there's not enough data, I'm not taking it because it's my health at the end of the day and I have a sovereign right to decide what goes inside my body. And I said the same thing to all my family and all my friends. Some listened, some didn't. I'm now obviously, 5 years later, whatever it is, very glad that I didn't. So, it's funny how if you look at like data like that from pharma and you look, and whether you go back years, a lot of the time there's always the conspiracy theorists that say no because of these things, and then 5, 10, 20 years later it comes out to be proven true,
Mm,
and it's no longer a conspiracy. So I think time has definitely been on our side on this one, where we've been shown that we were very correct to be hesitant with not having these foreign things injected in our body, because we still to this day don't know what was in it at all.
yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, we now we do know that there was SV40, simian
Oh,
virus
that
4.
we do know. Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, that's not a good look. I mean, you're
No.
talking about an oncogenic virus that has been shown to cause cancer in basically all mammals outside of what is it, the rhesus monkey that it's
Yeah.
naturally found in or something like that.
Yeah. And it didn't do very well in the polio vaccine either, did it? All right.
And
So
that's a whole rabbit hole in and of itself. People like Dr. Sherry Tempany I think she has a very strong foundational case. And yeah, that's something that I think people should definitely look into as well.
I agree. I think for anybody that wants to research these things, just I would say Google it, but I'd probably say try and find a different search browser for that one, because a lot of that stuff's not going to be found on there. But do your own research. This is the first principles approach, right? Like, do your own research. Like, even the things that we're saying today, if you don't believe it, do your own research. It's important, this whole, and again, something which you I guess you've touched upon as well, the blue light exposure, the non-native blue light exposure, the isolated blue light, lowering dopamine, like lowering that ability to critically think, like it does have that effect. So please do your research and make sure that what we're saying, one, is true, but also that you understand it, because if you don't understand it, then there's no value to it, So all these things that we are saying have value because we're trying to give you the why behind all of these things. So staying on the topic of the parenting side of things, just for one more thing, how did you and your partner, is it your wife?
Wife, yeah.
Yeah. How did you and your wife manage the sleep disruption, if there was any?
It's a great question. I think I've been asked this question a few times, and I'm trying to go back into the experience to really try to bring up some insight. The first 2 weeks from my memory were very tough because, I mean, you're essentially having to wake up around 10 to 12 times a night. My wife was breastfeeding, of course, and so that came with a huge adjustment period. I think you're inevitably going to have some sleep loss in that first couple week period, maybe even a couple months. But then that slowly started to shift, and I actually found my quality and quantity of sleep, and my wife also describes this as well to a certain degree because, we do co-sleep as well. I mean, at this point, I'm actually sleeping in a separate room while my 2-year-old is sleeping with my wife. And so co-sleeping is a big thing that I think there's a lot of fear built around in terms of the centralized narrative. But regardless, I think that I often say that there was no better quality of sleep because I was going to bed around 7:30 or 8 p.m. And so for me, it was
Amazing.
perfect. I mean, I'm going to bed essentially maybe an hour or two after nightfall. And, the quality of sleep was pretty much off the charts for me. And I
Wow.
routinely can get like up to 2 hours of REM and deep per night. Not all nights, but pretty much 70 to 80% of the way there. And that's, I think, the biggest takeaway is just making sure to have an environment that is circadian appropriate. Because if you think about how most babies are brought up these days, parents don't understand circadian biology. And so they're not thinking about the LEDs. They're not thinking about the flicker from the conventional lighting sources. They're not thinking about late night meals or any of these things. And they're also, I think they would be pretty shocked to know that even something as simple as like the mother's breast milk follows a circadian rhythm. During the morning time, you're talking about breast milk that's higher in cortisol. That's a good thing in this context. And then during the nighttime, you're talking about breast milk that's higher in melatonin. And so all of this
Wow.
stuff works together, and it's a very intricate process that on a surface level you would not think about. But of course, when you dive into the circadian mechanisms involved, a whole new world is basically revealed to you. And that's what I would urge parents to definitely follow. And I think just being cognizant of the lights, cognizant of the meal timing. Um, Outside of that, let me think. And then just waking up, trying to wake up around sunrise is a very important thing. And I think this also happens naturally when you're in circadian alignment. So baby will most likely wake up around sunrise. Maybe that probably differs depending on the time frame. Maybe the first 2 weeks they're not doing that.
Mhm.
But naturally you'll start to find things fall into place. And that's the real sweet spot that you want to be in, because it shows that you're headed in the right direction and you're doing things properly. Because
Mhm.
ultimately, timing is a big part of the circadian mechanism. And so if you're doing things right, the timing will be on point. If you're not doing things right, then the timing will be skewed in one way, shape, or form.
Wow. Dude, dropping some bombs here. I'm sure there'll be some parents here listening thinking, damn, I did not know. I mean, I didn't know that about the breast milk being more cortisol in the morning and more melatonin at night. That's incredible. Wow. Wow. Okay. Changing topic just slightly. You've mentioned this word a couple of times, and I know you've gone very deep on this topic on your posts, on other podcasts and stuff. But for the people that may not have heard this before, you've mentioned melanin. What
Mm.
is melanin? Why is it so important?
So melanin is think about it like nature's most incredible biological polymer. That's the tagline that I usually attach it to. And it really is, because if you look at melanin, I mean, it's definitely been around since, you know, the beginning stages of life on the earth. I mean, we're talking about a scale of billions of years at that point, but it's found almost everywhere in nature. It comes in many different forms. I think there are 5 forms in nature. only 3 apply to human biology. So you have neuromelanin, which is found in the brain. I think the human species is pretty unique in our ability to have that type of melanin. I think it's a big part of what actually makes us human, especially when you go deeper into the functions of melanin.
Mhm.
You have eumelanin, which is responsible for the blacks and browns in nature. So think of any animal that is a black or brown, whether it's a brown bear or a black panther. That's eumelanin at work. And eumelanin is interesting because it is very effective at being photoprotective, meaning just protective against radiation from the sun. But that's only one function. Usually, mainstream medicine and dermatology thinks about photoprotection, and they have a very reductive view of it. They only think that, oh, melanin is only designed to protect against sun because sunlight is bad, especially UV. But very reductive, very dead kind of philosophy in my mind. Eumelanin is incredible because it blocks basically 99.9% of UV light. But it's not just blocking it. I mean, obviously it's using the rest for systemic purposes,
Mm.
but it's mainly dissipating that form of or that UV light as heat, as to create certain effects and basically balance out exposure. Pheomelanin is responsible for basically the pinks, yellows, oranges, reds in nature. So think of like a red herring or a red fox. That's the type of melanin that's a bit less protective, around 20 to 40% initially. And that's the type of melanin that we attribute to lighter skinned people. And so when you notice that a lighter skinned person, maybe someone from a Nordic country or high latitude environment, they usually tan in kind of this reddish pinkish hue, or they're more likely to get that color when they're out in the sun. That's because of pheomelanin, along with blood that's actually pooling to the surface of the skin.
Mhm.
So that is not a defect. I think when we look at human evolutionary biology, melanin plays a very fundamental role in us thriving. I mean, fundamentally, it's radioprotective, protects against radiation from the sun. It's antiviral, antimicrobial, antifungal. It's able to chelate heavy metal ions from the skin barrier and systemically as well, meaning that people think of heavy metal toxicity. If you build up more melanin, it's actually able to adsorb a lot of those metals and um, basically slowly remove them from the system as to not create problems, aka heavy metal toxicity. What else is it? It's an anti-tumor compound, so also anti-cancer. If you think about the mainstream narrative on melanin, they only call it a sign of skin or DNA damage.
Mm.
It's a very reductive way to look at it, when in reality, it's actually the very thing that will protect you most against cancers and also create all these other systemic benefits. So that's a very important thing that I want people to understand, is that mainstream dermatology views melanin production, tanning, as a sign of skin or DNA damage that increases your risk of skin cancers or cancer at large. But then why is melanin an anti-tumor, anti-cancer compound shown in the literature? That's a direct glaring contradiction from centralized medicine, when you add the decentralized perspective with this work. And
Mm.
there are many of those contradictions. It's not just like, yeah, there are maybe 5 or 6 of them. No, there's quite literally hundreds of those contradictions at play here. And there are also other benefits to melanin as well that I can't think about. But we have to understand that it's basically the very thing that allows you to become a human being. And it's also the very thing that allows us to become very healthy.
Yep.
And so the more melanin you can build up, the better. And ultimately, if you sunbathe properly and you have a correct circadian aligned approach, that's going to serve as a very foundational protective mechanism going forward in your life. And there's also discussion of melanin being one of the most effective things you can do to block non-native EMF to a certain degree. So there's a lot that goes into it, but I think it's one of nature's most incredible creations, and it does work at the quantum level, essentially. If we're talking about electrons, protons, photoelectric effect, there's a lot to be discussed there, but it is absolutely incredible in my mind.
I don't know if I read this correctly, but does it help with the creation of energy from photons? Is that something that it does as well?
That's something I've heard. There's an individual, I think his last name's Herrera, and he talks about melanin, but I think there's a lot of holes that can be kind of aimed at in terms of his actual work. Like he
Right.
states that melanin can um, can produce these free electrons and whatnot. I don't know of the validity, like the strength of the work that he's involved with that.
Mhm.
But either way, I mean, that's something that I hear. That's something I hear from Dr. Jack Cruz. Cruz is a lot smarter than me when it comes to this respect, so I'm gonna trust him on that. Um, but yes, in my opinion, I think melanin does play a role in human photometabolism.
Mhm.
So we're not looking at only food as or water as a source of energy for the body, but we also have to consider light or full spectrum sunlight as an important factor in energy production as well, especially
Yeah.
when we're talking about mitochondrial function and how that translates into ATP production. I just think it's pretty asinine to suggest that full spectrum sunlight has nothing to do with energy
Mhm.
when we know that there's some very strong foundations involved there.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know if this is the same thing, but I've noticed that when I'm in the sun more, I don't eat as much. I'm not as
Yeah.
hungry. So I'm obviously getting energy from somewhere. So
Yeah.
I know that obviously there's leptin and ghrelin pathways that have been in play there too, but I'm sure I'm getting some photonic charge from somewhere, not just from the grounding as well, but even then we have to include that too. We're getting some grounding at the same time, so we're getting energy from elsewhere. And there are breatharians; they have to survive somehow. So I'm sure it's not just on the breath that they're surviving. It's got to be something to do with the light that they're experiencing as well. So
Yeah.
melanin, for those that are listening, is something you get from when you tan. So summer months in the UK, that's great because we have UVA and UVB and we can get all those beautiful things. At the moment, we've still got UVB, but it's a very short window. We get it from like 10:30 to like 3. So by the time that we get to probably the time that the clocks go back, which is like the 21st of October, there'll be probably no UVB here. So what do we do about melanin max in the winter time?
It's a very good question. I think it ties into this understanding that the human body is a seasonal, cyclical, circadian, and electromagnetic creature, right?
Hmm.
So it sounds like a mouthful, but essentially we are meant to follow the seasons,
Yeah.
depending on what latitude we're at, depending on haplotype, a number of things. But we're meant to go from summers that are typically hotter to winters that are typically colder. And so what are people like what are we supposed to do from a circadian perspective when there's not enough UV light to go around to get through our skin and produce vitamin D3, nitric oxide, all these other things? I think ultimately what we're looking to do is to maximize that sunlight during the sunny summer months, meaning we're storing more vitamin D3 in the body fat. We're storing different metabolites of vitamin D that are also water soluble during the
Hmm.
summertime, and we're building up that reserve to allow us to head into the wintertime. Once you head into the wintertime, I think it's not a game of UV light externally, at least anymore. I don't think it's necessarily about sunbathing as much as the summertime, but we're looking to do things like maximize cold. Cold, from an anecdotal perspective, from people who have messaged me quite a lot, will actually maintain a tan. This is a very interesting concept. I think it ties into biological semiconduction.
Hmm.
If you consider melanin as a biological semiconductor, it's interesting. If we look at technology, a lot of semiconductors are put under cold temperatures
Do
to
they work
run more.
better? Yeah.
And so, considering the biological context to this, I think it makes sense that melanin is uh, more efficient when it's exposed to cold. We certainly know that mitochondria become more efficient when they're exposed to cold. I believe Cruz talked about how they're kind of related to Carnot heat engines, meaning the colder your external surface gets, the hotter your mitochondria run to compensate, which means that the hotter they get, the more efficient they run.
Hmm.
Very interesting concept. I mean, mitochondria are very profound in their ability to um, basically run off of like 100% efficiency with energy conversion. I mean, they're incredible organelles that we're talking about here. And interestingly enough, when you have mitochondria that produce more ATP, ATP is something that's needed to create pigmentation in the skin. So again,
Oh.
you're talking about a feedback system that is very intricate here. And so that's the cold component. Not only will the cold allow you to hold on to more of your melanin, it will also allow you to create more biophotons or
Hmm.
light that you produce from within, which happens to also be found in the UVB range. So through the work of Dr. Tom Seeger, which he's a good friend who I find his work very interesting. He hypothesizes that if you get UVB in the in the biophoton range from cold, you're producing that light from within. That light then interacts with sulfated cholesterol, which then is hypothesized to either produce vitamin D3 or allow you to maintain stores longer throughout the winter. So we can see how this is a cyclical process that is very fascinating in my opinion. And then that's not even to mention like the different metabolites of vitamin D that are water soluble. Those can be stored for longer periods in the system. Um, you're talking about the fact that vitamin D or melatonin is able to bind to the vitamin D receptor, meaning it's able to create a lot of the same benefits as vitamin D3. What does that mean? That basically means that we want to maximize endogenous melatonin through both of its forms.
Mhm.
So near infrared light during the day hits subcellular or mitochondrial melatonin. That means if you're taking a walk outside during the winter, you're getting more of the skin exposed during the winter, you're going to get that near infrared and you're going to stimulate that form of melatonin. And then on the back end, during the nighttime, you want to stimulate the circulatory or pineal form of melatonin, which is a game of darkness. And so we're still going back to that universal duality of maximizing bright days under full spectrum sunlight, maximizing darkness with minimal circadian friendly lighting during the nighttime. And through that duality, I think we really have a very comprehensive understanding and practical application of how we can get the most of wintertime from a circadian perspective.
Wow. Knowledge bombs dropped. I love that. That's incredible. Thank you, brother. That was amazing. So for people that are very new to this whole kind of area, this whole field of quantum or circadian biology, or if you cast your mind back to when you first started discovering all of this, what were the things that you implemented or that you would recommend to implement, which were the biggest kind of needle movers for you?
Just from a practical like
Mm,
application,
mm,
I would say, and this is something that I've actually pieced together lately. It's a more recent insight for me, but I would say if you're going to use light at night, incandescents are decent, but they also come with the negative of actually suppressing endogenous circulatory melatonin. So because we need darkness at night, that means that the less light we have in the environment, the better. And so because of the fact that normal incandescents provide orange, yellow, blue, green, these are shorter wavelengths that actually suppress melatonin, especially blue and green, but most notably blue. That's where I think it would be wise for people to transition or get red incandescents because it
interesting.
doesn't come with those shorter wavelengths, which means
Mm,
that you can use red incandescents to light up the environment at night because usually people don't go to bed right after nightfall. They're doing other things like writing or working and playing with the family and whatnot. That's where I think you get the best of both worlds because you can protect circulatory melatonin from the pineal gland because of the fact that red has those red incandescents have longer wavelengths only, and then you can be able to do what you want to do at night. So I think red incandescents are the real hack that I would urge people to implement while also maintaining as much darkness as you can, because the darkness is very important in this whole discussion.
mhm,
And then outside of that, I would say placing an emphasis on watching UVA rise in the morning is very key, especially if you're somebody who struggles with mental health. If you're somebody who deals with ADHD or any of these, odd manifestations from a mental perspective, UVA is very important for the reason that you brought up, the aromatic amino acids. Those are made of benzene rings structurally, which absorb UV. They act as photon traps, as Cruz has talked about. And so you're basically allowing those aromatic amino acids to absorb UV, which then allows this whole process of transformation from, let's say, phenylalanine being an aromatic amino acid to, I believe it's, what is it? Is it tryptophan?
mhm,
Or no, not tryptophan. That's a different one. Phenylalanine gets turned into tyrosine, which gets turned into dopa, which then gets turned into dopamine, adrenaline, noradrenaline, and melanin.
mhm,
And so these aromatic amino acids are the key precursors to many of the foundational hormones and neurotransmitters that your body creates. So, when you're watching sunrise, make sure to wait about 45 minutes to an hour until that UVA rise comes out. And then you want to get at least 20 minutes that UVA rise. A very, very energetic practice, in my opinion. I think it adds so much to people's health, especially from a hormonal perspective. And
mm.
then again, the mental health piece.
Amazing, amazing. I say to all my clients, that's the most important one. I'm like, if you can only get 10 minutes of sunrise in the morning, sticking your head out of a window or standing in your garden, fine, because you've got to get your kids ready and all the rest of it. But please get at least 15 to 20 minutes of UVA. Even if you're in the car, just open the window, just get the light in, whatever you can do. And again, like, and I like you said this, you're not a light Nazi. So there's none of this kind of like this, you know, like I think like crews can be quite implicit on all these things, like there is no other option. It's like, well, there is, because there's life and we can't all live in El Salvador. So we have to be adjustable and adaptable. And I think being anti-fragile is quite important as well. But just do what you can with what you've got. But I don't know if you've noticed as well, and this is something I was thinking about yesterday. A lot of people, when you say to them to see the sunrise, see them say UVA, see the sunset, ground, well, all these things are free. But they're free in the sense of cost, in the sense of money, but they are time and energy costs, where they'll then say, well, can't I just use my red light? Or can I not just take a pill? It's like, okay, well, that's not a cost of energy or time, it's a cost of money. So it's convenience that people are choosing over the actual free things which are there. I don't know if you've noticed this when it comes to clients that may give you a little bit of pushback, or some of the replies you get on your X feed or on Instagram, that people will choose the cost of money convenience over the cost of time and energy. I don't know if you've noticed that at all.
Yeah, 100%. I think it is one of these side effects, at least from a societal level, of modern medicine and, you know, pharmaceutical influence. I really do think that's where we find a lot of this stuff, because ultimately, when we look at a society that orients its entire life around convenience, that's going to breed this sort of convenience mindset.
Mhm.
And for me, I think that even though you might think it's more convenient to begin with, you're leaving so much on the table and potentially opening yourself up to other side effects through that ignorance.
Mm.
And that ends up being a lot less convenient for you over the long term. And so it's kind of that, you know, if you want a hard life, you make what is it? You make easy, or you make
Hard life
comfortable.
now, easy life later, or easy life now, hard life later.
Exactly. And I think that all ties into it. And one thing that's certain is that there is no replacement for full spectrum sunlight. There is no replacement for endogenous melatonin that you produce at night.
Mm.
There's no pill that's going to come close. This is why I often talk crap about vitamin D3 supplements or melatonin supplements. I think those things are just reductive attempts at trying to um, kind of replace what nature provides, but you can't do that. I think that's impossible. And
Mm.
this is also why I follow the philosophy that human beings will never create a light source that comes that comes as close to the perfection that full spectrum sunlight provides. You know, all the circadian lighting hacks and gimmicks, I don't think that stuff is going to come close in terms of its effect. And yeah, I think we need to breed that out of people's minds as quickly as possible, because it ends up creating second and third order consequences.
I agree. And I do notice that in like the biohacking space. Like I was at a health optimization event over the, not like weekend, just one weekend before. And I have a red light company, but ours is a very specific red light. It's got pulse frequencies, 10, 20 and 40 hertz, because they do different things. The 40 hertz is just the specific one that I wanted to focus on, because that helps with neurodegeneration and other things like that. So it has a meaning to use it. But I notice people will choose the red light over going outside. And I'm like, if it's sunny and it's clear blue sky, I would suggest you go outside. And then I get people say, well, what do you do on a cloudy day? What do you do when it rains? Well, I still go outside, but I will also realize that it's very dark outside when it's like that. The lux isn't so good. So when I come home, I will turn my red light on, because the lux of that light is going to be not as bright as outside, but it's still, to my eyes, it's going to be bright. So I'm going to get a little bit more red light, a little bit more infrared from that, but it's not replacing it. It's an addition to, because as you say, you can't replace what's outside. So for everyone listening, as I say, this is the light bringer when it comes to circadian biology. You cannot substitute going outside, even when it's cloudy, even when it's raining. The infrared and the red light spectrums, all these other spectrums are there. Go outside. just go outside.
It sounds so simplistic to most people, but it really is that straightforward. I think that we have to understand the context of these certain tools. Like, you know, the red in the background, I have a red and infrared panel here. I leave that on indoors because it's supplemental. I think that's the key word that we want to focus on. It's supplemental because of the fact that indoor environments are deficient in red and infrared.
Yep.
And so it only makes sense that I'm going to add this during a time where I'm going to spend an extensive period indoors. And again, it stays the same. Like that's probably the question I get the most. What do I do when it's wintertime? And I tell people, you open the window if you have to stay indoors to allow the full spectrum in. If you look at the work of Dr. Rogers Sayholt, a friend of mine who actually lives in California, hopefully I get to meet him soon, but I think he's a quadruple board certified doctor. So, he's no slump when it comes to this stuff, but he actually shows the difference between between indoor environments and outdoor environments when it comes to looking at infrared. So he recently bought this infrared filter and he shows you the before and after, and it's pretty astonishing because the filter allows you to see infrared, which is normally invisible to human beings, in the form of the color red.
Wow.
And when you look outside, even on a cloudy day, the entire environment is bathed in red, which means that going outside will allow you to get the most benefit here, even if it's under shade. And so for me, it's just like, what do you do when it rains? Go outside. If
Yep.
you can dance in the rain, even better, because you're getting cold exposure. You're going back to this kind of personality that you had as a child. I think that's very
Yep.
helpful. This
I agree.
childlike spirit. You're getting the benefit of infrared. If it's cloudy, same thing across the board. I mean, a lot of the same principles apply, really.
Yeah, I agree. And it's difficult to get people to go outside because they're indoors in their temperate 70-degree homes, which when it's cold outside, it makes it even colder. So I get very weird looks when I'm walking around now at the moment because it's generally a lot colder in the UK, but I'm still in my short shorts. I'm still in like a linen shirt or a cotton shirt with either short sleeves or my sleeves rolled up. And that's how I walk around all day long. Like I woke up the other mornings, 2 degrees out. I'm out there in my short shorts and my linen shirt because when it does eventually get really cold, if I do put trousers on, it's going to help me. And I'm still just going to be in trousers and a shirt. I'm not going to put a jacket on. I'm going to still hope to maintain that temperature hold because as much as light is an input, temperature is an input. And this is
Yeah.
why I think save on your gas and electricity bills. Just turn your heating down. Like get used to the cold. Like all my windows are wide open still. And it's cold. Don't get me wrong. Like the temperature in my flat right now is 17 degrees. So it's not warm, but
Yeah.
have the windows open, get the light in, get adjusted to the cold. I think it's staying temperature adjusted is important as well.
Yeah, very good point, especially from a circadian timing standpoint, because temperature is a Zeitgeber. In other words, it's an external circadian cue. I think what is there? There's food, social interactions, or even a Zeitgeber.
Really?
Yeah, actually, because if you consider the fact that we are a social animal, it only makes sense, right? At specific times of day, let's say like early morning or late morning, maybe even afternoon, that's when you see the first person or you see your family or something like that. So
Yeah.
that actually ties into circadian timing as well, along with some other things that I didn't mention. But I think this also ties into a very important discussion that not many people know about. And this is one of the foundational epistemological principles that we have to rely on. We have to understand that the human body is a hormetic system. It relies on hormesis. So what you're mentioning with the cold is that you're developing this adaptation through hormesis by progressively exposing yourself to cold.
Mhm.
And so over time, you'll be able to get more cold exposure and be able to handle more or colder temperatures as time goes on. And the same thing applies to UV light exposure.
Yeah.
When modern medicine and dermatology demonizes UV light, they don't consider the circadian perspective. They don't understand the difference between eustress and distress. Eustress is a hormetic stressor, meaning it ends up creating a more powerful and stronger organism, where distress is like the classical damage that we think about or normal
Yeah.
stress. And I think that's a very powerful thing because going forward, you can apply that to any of these health subjects and you can gain a more comprehensive and holistic understanding of what's really going on.
I agree. Brother, what a bombshell. Now, I want to be very, very respectful of your time because I know you've got a youngster and it's your start of your day. So,
We can go longer if you want, by the way.
oh, really?
Yeah, I've
Interesting.
got time.
Okay. So I do have a question I wanted to ask you because obviously you're very deep into the circadian side of things. Where do you see this, I don't want to say form, but this area of health going in the future? Like, how do you see it being adopted? Do you see more mainstream doctors or physicians like just taking it on and listening to it more and applying it more? Like, how do you see the future of this shaping?
Man, I would say yes. That's probably the most positive uh, take that I can have on it. I think that there are certainly some doctors that I'm beginning to see take on a more circadian perspective. I mean, I'll give you a more anecdotal experience. my father-in-law is one of the top family physicians in the nation, in the US. And I'm beginning to see him come around to some of these circadian principles. Funny enough, not even from me. I recently found that he printed out a couple pieces of paper, and it was very interesting to me because I was looking at, okay, you're talking about mitochondrial bioenergetics, you're talking about full spectrum sunlight. Who wrote this? And lo and behold, it actually turned out to be a piece written by Dr. Alexis Cowan. And to me, that was very fascinating because it was kind of like these decentralized ideas are penetrating the centralized narrative. And I think that ultimately we're going to see a lot of gimmicks. We're going to see a lot of like circadian friendly lighting stuff and things that are still very reductive that don't really make any progress in this space, because ultimately um, what I find is that the biohacking space takes on a lot of the same reductive ideas as mainstream medicine. And that's a big problem because they're trying to find a hack around nature when there is no hack, just plain and simple. You can't really profit off of this unless you're a circadian educator who's helping people one-on-one or providing a proper course or something like that. And so for me, I do think that there's a huge uphill battle that's going to be had, that we're going to face. It's going to come with a lot of quote unquote bloodshed. People are going to have to kind of pass on from this life for these ideas um, to kind of propagate around society. And it ties into the book that is it Thomas Kuhn? Yeah, Thomas Kuhn wrote, which is called the Structure of Scientific Revolutions. He talks about how there are basically two pathways through which a scientific revolution can happen. It can either happen slowly, meaning you add information upon, um, you know, upon itself over time, if to eventually getting to this grand insight, or it's just you completely blow it out of the water because a heretic comes around and he starts to question a lot of the things that the mainstream philosophy is tackling. And so I think this circadian space and kind of getting these ideas into the mainstream framework is going to take more of that latter route. I think there's going to have to be a huge blow up to where the dermatologists, the ophthalmologists, the optometrists, all of these people will eventually either have to literally die. That's a negative thing, of course, but like they're just naturally going to pass because they get into older age and those ideas pass with them. And new ideas will have to come into its place. So hopefully that kind of made sense. But I think it's definitely going to be a more, what's the word for it? A more disruptive type of experience.
I agree. And I think, looking at what's happening in the States with what RFK is doing and how he's trying to kind of lead the charge and all of that to be that disruptor, it has to happen. You can't do this type of change, can't happen naturally and I guess evolutionarily over time. It is going to have to be disruptive. Things are going to have to break down fully so that they can be rebuilt better. That's the only way that it's going to happen. Well, not better, but differently.
Yeah, and real quick, sorry to apologize, but I just want to clarify on one point because I feel like I haven't explained it as well there. When I say that people are inevitably going to have to die or pass on, I don't mean assassinations, of course. I literally mean that there's a classic quote that says that science advances one funeral at a time.
Yeah,
meaning that the people who are at the apex of a given narrative will have to pass on, and those ideas pass on with them because new scientists come in and they take on certain ideas that we're sharing. So just some clarification on that point.
I knew what you meant, but if there was anybody listening that didn't, that's exactly because age is undefeated, right? Like that's going to happen. Like we're all going that same way, but the people that are the older are the ones at the top, and they're the ones that govern everything. So as you say, for the new ideas to come in, you have to remove the people that are stopping it because they've got their own cognitive biases, they've got their own perceptions of everything. So I knew exactly what you meant, brother. I knew what you meant. Right. I would love you to leave the listeners with 3 just bits of information, like bits that you think that they should implement tomorrow, like easy things that they can do just to start this journey for them.
I would say number 1, full spectrum sunlight is paramount, which means that any isolated wavelengths, like isolated red, infrared, they can have their benefits. They can be supplemental, but most certainly isolated UV is not the same thing as full spectrum sunlight. So UV from the full spectrum is not the same thing as UV in isolation. In my opinion, it completely breaks apart the hormetic process. And if anyone wants to learn a bit more, they can go to my Substack. I mean, I've talked about this at length, but basically what I'm trying to say is that from a practical application standpoint, you do not want to use tanning beds or tanning boots. because they provide isolated UVA for the most part, with a little bit of UVB. But most importantly, they don't come with that red and infrared, which are the balancing hormetic forces. And so full spectrum sunlight, sunbathing is something that is paramount. You're going to get most of the benefit there. So avoid isolated UV tanning beds and tanning booths. Circadian eyesight regeneration is very interesting to me. It's a deep rabbit hole, but I think that if you can transition from removing contacts to going on prescription glasses, that's a big change that you can make, because contacts provide a lot of issues: corneal hypoxia, not enough oxygen to the cornea, forever chemicals, and then also altering the full spectrum that we get from the sun. If you can go to the prescription glasses and just bring them down from eye level consistently outside, that's going to be a major benefit for you to get some sort of benefit from an eyesight regeneration perspective. And then eventually, I would not be shocked to see if you go from having prescription lenses to eventually having good enough eyesight to where you don't need them at all. I've seen that, believe it or not. So that's a big thing. Sun gazing also ties into that in the early morning, in the evening. And last one for me is I would say stick with the red incandescence at night. I think people would notice some massive effects from that instead of using any other form of lighting, for sure.
Amazing. And as you noted on your first point, where can people find you? How can they learn more from you? Where's the best places to go for all of this information?
So the Instagram, X, and Substack are at Zaid K Dahhaj, ZaidKDahhaj. I'd say that the most beneficial place, if people want to learn about this more comprehensively, is the Substack. Because the Instagram and the X are kind of all over the place. It's just whatever I find interesting, I post. But the Substack has a more comprehensive breakdown on specific subjects like vitiligo from a circadian perspective, or cataracts, or any of these other things. And it breaks down a lot of the epistemology involved with this stuff, especially tackling a lot of the mainstream narratives that are pretty flawed, in my opinion. And then outside of that, the 2 a.m. podcast is a very, just, I think, fun exercise and discussion. We have a lot of cool people on. We're going to have, my midwife couple on soon in terms of just releasing that episode. We had Mark Bell on, so that's going to come out soon. But a very eclectic conversation, kind of going for those late night conversation vibes. And then I also do have a course, but I don't market it as too much. It's called the 80-20 course, but it's a pretty comprehensive breakdown of circadian biology and a little bit of electromagnetism, a little bit of water, but mostly on the circadian principles, which, they can DM me if they really want access to that.
Beautiful. I'm going to put all of that in the show notes below so that everybody can come and find you. And I recommend going to grab the course. Definitely recommend the Substack. The Substack is mind-blowing. It really is. I could sit there and read your Substack all day and then I would probably never get any work done, but I absolutely love it, brother. I really do. And I just want to thank you again for coming on. I'm going to respect my circadian rhythm because the sun has set now, so I'm going to be going for my circadian walk. But thank you so much for coming on. I'd love you to come back on so we can go down some rabbit holes a little bit more, so we'll do that a little bit later down the line. And Zaid, brother, thank you so much for sharing time. I'm really, really grateful.
Thank you, brother. It was a very fun conversation, and I definitely want to do round 2, round 3, however many we can get.
Oh, mate, well, I'm having you back, that's for sure. We're going to go down some rabbit holes on that one. That's the definite. Friends, so that is Zaid K Dahhaj. Thank you so much for listening or watching. Please like, share, subscribe, leave your comments as usual. Until the next one, stay blessed and stay well.